Such an opportunity to talk about my two passions, which are social entrepreneurship and addressing wicked problems. Before I begin though, I'd like to recognise Stephen Haynes, who's in the room today, because back in 1999 to 2001 I worked as the Employment Development Officer at the City of Salisbury, and it was through that opportunity that I had the chance to explore social entrepreneurship. In 2000 we had in Australia the release of the Welfare Reform Final Report, which really brought to the fore, I guess, that the prominence of... So the idea of social entrepreneurship being able to address wicked problems, there's a bit of difficulty with that, because social entrepreneurs usually use cause and effect logic to address problems in communities. And by that I mean they use results chains, such as what's up on the slide there, where they think that if they can bring together resources and do activities, and wicked problems don't work that way. So if we look at the different types of problems, the type of problems by using these traditional project, program, logic, cause and effect approach of working, for complicated problems, they have more components, but you can actually separate out those components. For simple problems, you can develop procedures. For complicated problems, like employment programs, you can develop theories of change or blueprints, and you can actually transfer them from one context to the other. But dealing in complex problems is more like raising a child. Now, if you've raised children, you realise that things don't quite go to plan. You can develop a blueprint for raising a child and follow that blueprint, but that could actually even be detrimental. And if you've had more than one child, you've probably realised that you can't transfer your approach from one child to another child. Every child is different. And when you're bringing up children, how you actually succeed is going to depend on a lot of causal factors. And those causal factors aren't the same as for simple and complicated problems, because they're all intertwined. Where your child goes to school is going to determine their friendship groups. So there's this interwoven mess of causal factors that underpin a complex problem. And so now we move on to wicked problems. These are complex problems as well, but they're complex social policy problems. So we have governments involved in this kind of problem, and we also have a huge different diverse lot of stakeholders who come together to try to address these kind of problems. And these are the biggies, like climate change and terrorism and poverty and obesity. And you can't actually consider a social entrepreneur being able to develop a project or program that's going to solve terrorism or climate change. That isn't how we address this kind of problem. And this is why. This is what this kind of problem looks like underneath. This is a systems diagram of the underpinning causal factors illustrating obesity. And not only have you got this multitude of underpinning causal factors, but you've got all of these positive and negative feedback loops that connect these causal factors. So if you actually developed an initiative as a social entrepreneur that targeted a few of those causal factors and developed a program, you also run the risk of unforeseen circumstances in other parts of the problem. So this isn't the way to address this kind of problem. If you think, okay, we just develop initiatives for all of those different causal factors, it's a bit like developing parts for this dog. There's an essence that exists between those causal factors through those positive and negative feedback loops. So when you address wicked problems, you've got to address the whole problem at the same time. And what you actually have to focus on is what we call a problem ecosystem, all of those causal factors and all of those interrelationships at the same time. And we do that by using a solution ecosystem, which is the focus for this kind of problem, is all of the initiatives that address any of those underpinning causal factors in a geographical community, so I'm so pleased there's local government folk here today. All of those causal factors have got initiatives that are attempting to address them. The focus is on a community, a geographical community, and all of the initiatives that are addressing any of those underpinning causal factors, and all of the organisations that are partnering on those initiatives. And the reason for that is there's this law, the law of requisite variety, which says that when you address a problem, how you address it has got to have the same level of complexity as the problem itself. And so when we think about the complexity of wicked problems, how we address them needs to have that same level of complexity. And communities have that level of complexity. So the type of community we're focusing on is solution ecosystems, these ecosystems of players that are addressing the underpinning causal factors. And so the attractor word in there is a complexity science term, which we won't go into, but the idea when you're addressing this kind of problem is to transition that solution ecosystem from its current state to a new state that's more effective and more coherent, bringing all of those different initiatives together at addressing that wicked problem. So the focus, whether you're looking at social entrepreneurship, whether you're looking at urban planning, whether you're looking at energy transitions, it's about transition management, and you're actually working with system dynamics to transition systems. So how can the poor lone social entrepreneur actually have an opportunity to address wicked problems? Well, these solution ecosystems are made up of initiatives. And so with regards to transitioning a solution ecosystem, it does depend on being able to create the conditions for transitions. But the social entrepreneurs initiative is part of those ecosystems. So the more coherent they can be with other initiatives that are addressing the same problem, the better. And the stronger that their initiative is at addressing the particular causal factors that they're targeting, the better the solution ecosystem is also going to be. So when we talk about social entrepreneurship, there isn't this thing called social entrepreneurship really, it's social entrepreneurships. And so there's a complexity approach to social entrepreneurship which focuses on the transition of solution ecosystems. On the right-hand side there's a whole lot of different types of social entrepreneurship that focus on the social enterprise. So we've got a British approach, which is like a marketisation approach, which is into revenue earning streams and into being spin-outs from government with regards to service delivery and social finance and those sorts of ways of working. Then you've got the Scottish approach, which has got more of a community focus approach, so community enterprise focus approach, supported by government in Scotland, a strong focus on values of equity and inclusion. And then you've got the MS approach, which is mainland Europe, which has got a strong focus on participation in their governance. And then we've got finally the social enterprise school, which is the American approach, which focuses on earned income revenues for non-profits and has a strong focus on work opportunities for disadvantaged people. Then down at the bottom left, there's the social innovation school. Now, where those ones on the right focus on the enterprise, the Social Innovation School focuses on innovation. So for those of you who've got a bit of an academic interest in entrepreneurship, the ones on the right have got that minimalist, starting a business kind of approach to entrepreneurship, where the Social Innovation School has got more of that Schumpeter, creative destruction kind of approach to social entrepreneurship. Now that social innovation school, the way they actually operate is they pick winners. They take a systems thinking approach and they look at where in that system of that problem ecosystem they could create the greatest impact. And so they target those underpinning causal factors where they could have the greatest impact. The problem with this approach is that because of all those positive and negative feedback loops, they can have unforeseen consequences from their actions, but at least they're aware of the system, the broader system in which they're operating. That type of approach of focusing on the system is really taking off globally. So for the last few years, Oxford University, the business school there, has run a Map the System competition. They've ditched their traditional business planning competition for social enterprise, and they've moved to a Map the System competition. The Map the System competition for this year had over 1,000 teams enter from around the world. And so the focus of that is to actually understand the system that the problem is a part of. I have 2 social enterprises, Wicked Lab and Community Capacity Builders, and Community Capacity Builders has now changed its program to take a Map the System focus. So in Unit 1 we look at the different types of social entrepreneurship. Unit 2 is about mapping the problem and the solution ecosystem. It's not until we know the actual environment that we're working in that we look at developing initiatives, and then we look at what's the best way to institutionalise those through a social enterprise. My other social enterprise, Wicked Lab, we focus at the complexity science end of social entrepreneurship. So we've developed software to assist communities and governments to transition solution ecosystems to new ways of working. So we've developed software, and the software actually has got a lot of reporting functions where people can track their ecosystems. We do offer a free webinar once a year, and that will be coming up soon. So if you go onto the Wicked Lab website and you want to learn a bit more about addressing wicked problems and what the kinds of offerings we have at Wicked Lab, come and have a freebie introduction. Sign up for our newsletter and we'll keep you informed. I also want to take this opportunity to mention that in South Australia we have 5 months we've been going, a social enterprise network in South Australia, a social enterprise meetup group that, as of this morning, has got 307 members in 5 months, which is pretty cool. And so this is people who are running social enterprises or who are interested in supporting social enterprises. The exciting part about this is we're actually copying Queensland, and they have a Brisbane meetup group which is managed by a peak body for social enterprise. So the plan is for this meetup group to be managed by a peak body for social enterprise in South Australia, and we've already got a working group that's working on that, which has been supported by Volunteering SANT, that's establishing that. And these state networks are being established all around Australia. We're coming together as a national conference on the 20th of August in Victoria. We've put in a bid to hold the Social Enterprise World Forum in Australia in 2021, and confidentially, to a big room and on camera, we're in the final 2, so we're pitching in Ethiopia at this year's Social Enterprise World Forum. So if you're interested in this space, please come and play. Thank you.
Come stay up here. There's always questions at this Rotary Club, so if anybody got a question for Sharon? I'm sure we have. Yes. Okay, Steve Larkins.
Thanks, Sharon. That Noodle Nation map always sort of terrifies me, but it's a pretty accurate rendition of lots of organisations that we all know about. Now, all of us have been involved in organisations where the random variable are the people involved and the agendas they're running. How is that caught up in this sort of modelling? Is that a reasonable question, or am I asking that at too low a level?
No, there's no such thing as a lower level. You're talking to someone who left school at the age of 14 the first time round, so I think what happened in the late 90s, the introduction of complexity science into social entrepreneurship has come from organisational development. And in the late 90s, I think what people were discovering in organisational development was that people were realising that if they were trying to focus on the people within organisations, people would game the systems that they were working in. They would find way, you could put down whatever procedures and that you wanted, but people would find a way to game them. And really the transfer of principles from complexity science to organisational development was coming above the human people part and actually looking at how do we create the conditions for what we want to emerge. And so that's where they actually align. There's a I can't remember the name of the book, but it was in the late 90s by one of the key people who started this introduction into social entrepreneurship, and he uses a case study what happened in a hospital and how they actually changed their way of working to working on conditions that people could work within, which would change the way change people's behaviour.
Thank you for your talk. Could you give us an example of where it has worked profitably for an individual or a private sector organisation, and perhaps one where it hasn't worked and why?
That's a great question. I would say it was quite funny when I first started. I was watching a lot of work that was happening in the Netherlands with regards to the universities in the Netherlands in the urban planning space that were taking this approach. And I went out to dinner with one of the department heads when I visited the Netherlands, and he was so blown away that we were actually doing this, because it would been even though I was watching what they were doing, it was very academic. I would say that the furthest approach we've had is a community in Western Australia that's using this approach for food insecurity. It's hard with it being in Western Australia because we're not close to see where they're up to, but they're taking a living laboratory, a systems approach to that though, with regards to looking at food insecurity and bringing people together to transition the system, and they're using our software. In South Australia, the City of Marion and the state government are using our software for greening Marion, but that's at a very early stage. We've learnt from our experience of what doesn't work. So we first off started with the software. We couldn't sell the software because no one understood what we were talking about. When we started talking about complexity science, everyone just eyes glazed over. So we developed a complex systems leadership program. Then we found people were going through getting an understanding of what was involved, but they were just ticking off whether initiatives in their communities has various characteristics. So now we've moved to this lab approach where we're starting to get success. In September, I'm actually speaking at an international systems innovation conference in London, which is bringing people from all over the world that are actually, and even though I attend a lot of academic conferences in this space, this particular conference in London is bringing together practitioners. So it's early days, I'll admit it's at early days, but we have got projects on the ground, and we've got projects on the ground in Australia. We're also working with 6 sites for Save the Children in the UK as well.
Hello, my name is Tatiana. So I'm very passionate about the social enterprise and how we can, let's say, help and fix and integrate the society into solving what is so nicely named wicked problems. And people know from my recent trip in America that I was really upset about homelessness, and that's one of the things that you probably tack on. How we can put that from the, let's say, from that chaos of the world onto more practical here, let's say, in Adelaide, because you have in that software, which is a complex software, you're probably running on the complex databases. Are we merged? Are we completely in a network that we can tackle certain problems here within our home, and then we can go further to our big island, our continent, and then go to the world? So please, if you can give us just clarity on that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think that connects in a way to the previous question too, because, you know, looking at this kind of work on the ground in South Australia, we had one, I won't name the local authority, but we had one council in South Australia that started using our software for a particular wicked problem and discovered that they had over 300 initiatives that they were supporting for this particular problem that they weren't aware of. So even starting off by actually looking at what are all the initiatives that are addressing under the underpinning causal factors can come as a real shock when you actually start thinking, when you actually start focusing. So I would say for South Australia, that's really your first start, is to actually become aware of what is actually happening in your communities that are addressing the underpinning causal factors for a wicked problem. And then how our software works is we look at those, and once we've got those initiatives, we have a look at if those initiatives have got any characteristics that influence the system's dynamics for the whole ecosystem to help the ecosystem transition. So that's what we identify. So I would say, going back to the previous question, why it's taking us so long to really get what we wanted as runs on the board is we were getting, I guess, we were getting early stage outcomes of just the awareness of people being aware that they've got all these initiatives addressing, what are the initiatives addressing your underpinning causal factors for a wicked problem? And because people had never had software that would even be able to show them that, we weren't moving people on because people were still focused on, oh my goodness, we're supporting 300 initiatives in our community to do similar stuff. So if you were thinking about working this way, that's where I would start.
Sharon, thank you very much for an interesting presentation. I wouldn't mind going back to one of those charts, afterwards, because I think I spotted a spelling mistake in the left-hand box. But
okay, that's right. Yeah.
The name Wicked Lab, Wicked and Deadly are two names I associate with my Indigenous friends. But can you just explain why you decided on the name Wicked Lab?
I guess there's a Rittel and Weber report that goes back to the 80s in urban planning. Which was the first naming of this kind of problem, and it actually looked at the difference between wicked and tame problems. So it is a name that's been associated with this kind of problem that has these characteristics. So that would probably be the underpinning reason for the name, and probably my co-founder and I are a bit wicked as well, so we kind of like the idea of having a wicked lab. Thank you.
Have we got any other questions? No? Okay. I also want to let you know that I actually attend the Social Enterprise Network, which Sharon invited me to. I go with two hats on, one as a Rotarian and one in my work at the Department for Education. And if anyone wants to come along, they're amazing. 2 months ago, I don't know if I've got time, but I want to tell you, we meet at different places all the time, and met at this place in Whitmore Square called Cafe Outside the Square. And if anybody, that's a social enterprise. It's brilliant, and it's supporting the homeless, and yet it's open as a cafe during the day, and in the evenings you can go there for meetings and functions. I'm not doing a plug for them, but this is a type of thing happening in Adelaide that a lot of people aren't aware about, and you pay it forward. So when you go in, you pay, part of what all the proceeds go to then making a meal for one of the men in the Vinnie's homeless shelter that night. So it's and a range of other things. So come along. It's on Meetup. Wonderful. Yeah. So thank you very much, Sharon. We do have something in recognition of you speaking with us today. I'm just going to get it because I left it on the floor. It's a mystery prize. It's something new that we've initiated within the club to give our guest speakers a certificate of appreciation for addressing our weekly lunch meeting. And on your behalf, a donation has been made in your name to help in the eradication of polio in the world, which is one of our biggest projects within Rotary internationally.
That's
so
wonderful.
Thank you
so
very
much.
much. Thank you. Can we all stand to thank Sharon? Thank you.